Well, every once in a while, we check in with the fire chief in the city of Battle Creek, David Schmaltz, and today is the day. Good morning, Chief.
Morning, Rich. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here today. I guess the big story of late is station number 1 downtown, and it was closed, it was open, now it's closed, or something like that. What does that really mean? What's really going on here?
Well, you're exactly right. Station 1 was not operational for about 8 years. And what that means is really we weren't having the firefighters respond out of there with the engines, the apparatus and things like that, but it still housed all the administration training and the inspection prevention division. So when I took over 3 years ago, it was one of my goals to try to have us restaff that. So what I was able to do then is I brought down our ladder truck. It made sense to me with the high rises downtown to try to get our 100-foot ladder truck down there at Station 1, and it could only fit in either Station 1 or Station 6, which is out on the south side of town. Mm-hmm. Now again, in the fire service, a true vehicle that's called a truck does not have water, doesn't have a pump on it or anything like that. So this truck was just basically a aerial ladder with ground ladders and things like that. So even though I was staffing it, the station was open, there really was no ability to extinguish a fire. Now, that's not to say that having that truck there wasn't important, but it was. And then the staffing levels that I do have, we had to run all these vehicles, the big heavy vehicles as I call them, on medical calls, which at the time was working just fine. So it was great. I was really pleased to open up Station 1, and then you fast forward to 2016, and nobody can foresee this. Everything ages, vehicles age, buildings age, and stuff like that. Well, unfortunately for us in the department, the bottom kind of fell out starting in January. We had an unforeseen accident, the rollover. I don't know if anybody remembers that.
Yes.
And thank the Lord, nobody was seriously injured. So we lost a vehicle there. And again, that replacement vehicle actually should be arriving here in Battle Creek next week. With as long as the final inspection goes well, and then hopefully in service in the next 2, so that's good. But right around September, October, unfortunately, 2 of our 3 ladder trucks were in for inspections, and the mechanics found cracked frames.
Wow!
Right. So the one was over 40 years old. It was almost virtually impossible to fix it. The company that actually manufactured that apparatus is no longer in business. They would have to fabricate the rail, the frame rail from hand, and then get the right tested. So I made the decision we're not even going to go that way because it wasn't up to standard anyways. A week later, our 1999, the truck that I actually brought down to Station 1, cracked frame. Yeah, I know, right? The mechanic found it, and we had to replace the fuel tank. Again, 18-year-old vehicle, and just to get started, we were looking at $100,000 just to replace it. Now, when you talk to the manufacturer, the guys that were going to do that, that's just to get started. They couldn't tell me what would it be like once they got it down and they found other stuff. And we were looking at trying to have a refurbishment done on that vehicle anyways. The cost was going to run about $500,000.
Oh, my goodness.
I know, you throw these numbers out like they're $5 bills, but in the fire service, these apparatus are so expensive. So when all that stuff went down, it really made me start to look at really how we were operating. Each year, our call volume continues to rise and rise and rise. In 15, we were over 7,100 calls. I don't know the exact number so far in 2016, but I anticipate it's going to be that or more. And 70 to 75% of our calls are EMS. So if you can imagine, we're running down the road with these heavy, large pieces of apparatus, and based on our staffing levels and the amount of people that I have to let off, for contracts, for vacations and stuff like that, we weren't able to put what we call our squads, which are our little pickups and other things in service to take the load off. So going forward, you had to reevaluate exactly how we were operating.
Right.
So myself and the battalion chiefs on my staff, we spent a good 2 to 3 weeks in my office. I mean, it was littered with sticky notes and paper all over the walls with different options. How do we replace the vehicles? Which route do we go? And we had to really look at redeploying the operational side of things just to try to take some of this pressure off the vehicles.
And when we come back in a minute, we'll talk about how you've sought to do that. And we'll also talk about what a shiny new fire truck really costs if you were to replace it. That's coming up in just a minute on WBCK. 95.3 WBCK Wednesday. We're here with Battle Creek Fire Chief Dave Schmaltz talking about how vehicles age and then frames crack all at once and things like that. Yeah, I think people can relate to this. I guess the most common equivalent in everybody's daily life is their car. You buy a car and some people drive them till they quit, and sometimes that's sooner than later. And the point is, you use something, it's going to begin to wear. But I think, and tell me how you look at this. When you look at a fire apparatus like a truck or an engine, is it looked upon the same way as, say, we look at airplanes? You use them for 20 or 30 years. You just maintain them, and they keep going. And it's not replaced as often as somebody's personal car. Is that the way you look at fire equipment?
Yeah, I would think so, Rich. It's a little more convoluted, I think, than that.
Yeah.
You look at the industry standards. Take the city of Detroit, or even New York City. They replace their vehicles every 5 to 10 years. I mean, it's constantly being replaced. And it's just because of the amount of call volume, the amount of runs that they're going on. Now, you take a small rural fire department, and they could probably get 30, 35 years out of a vehicle. Now, the national standard says, and again, it's only if you adopt it, that, 25 years, you should take the vehicle completely out of service. Now, for some organizations, that is just not realistic. And it's not realistic because of the cost. Like you said, your car, you can run down a local dealership and pick one out. You really don't have too many options when you're talking emergency vehicles in the fire service. You can buy used, which most national experts will tell you don't buy used because you don't want to buy somebody else's problems. They tend to try to get you to shy away from a stock or a demo because you really should be buying what is right for you. So the proverbial push is, the recommendation is always build yourself a custom apparatus. So when you start doing that, the process to actually get that truck can run anywhere from 12 to 18 months.
Wow.
So for example, again, we talked a little bit earlier about the rollover accident. We basically took the exact same spec of the engine we bought just prior to that, went to the dealer, so we didn't have to do any of that other legwork, and it still took almost a year to get the vehicle, simply because of the frame chassis has to be built. It's all custom. But what you get from a custom is a very robust vehicle to suit your needs. So what we try to do is, again, 15 to 20 years, what I call on the front line, which is the first out, and then you put it 5 years into reserve, and then you rotate it out. What you try to do is you try to get yourself on a vehicle replacement schedule. Inevitably, what tends to happen, and this happens all over the country, municipalities start to feel a pinch. And they start to feel a pinch in finances. And, Battle Creek is no different. So what you do is, you start looking at each other. Can we get another year? Can we get another year? And before you know it, that other year is just turned into 15. And then, you start to circle the drain a bit, and we're kind of there.
So does Battle Creek set aside money in its budget every year for vehicle replacement?
We don't. Traditionally, from what I understand, again, only being here 3 years, that we tend to take out a bond or something and we pay for it that way. Now, I will say that at the last year's budget meetings, it was discussed that from commissioners that we need to really start a fund where we start setting stuff aside for capital projects. And that's what I would certainly encourage, because, again, the price never goes down. You want to stay ahead of the curve if at all possible. So even though we've had these major setbacks, I'm trying to stay positive about it. With this move that we're talking about is, kind of closing Station 1. It's actually reducing my overall fleet by one vehicle. So that's, $500,000 that really we're not going to have to worry about down the road. And it's kind of helping me shore up some of that. But now, cracked frames, thank First Commission approved an extra little bond issue for us to go get this ladder truck that we're replacing. So there is light at the end of the tunnel for us right now. But I don't want to be in this position 20 years
Absolutely.
down the road. So.
Right. So if it costs $500,000 to rehab a fire truck, what does it cost to buy a new one?
Sure. When I said $500,000 to rehab this particular vehicle, it's because it was our ladder truck.
Yeah.
It was a 100-foot aerial ladder with a platform on it. Very, very big vehicle. So that's why that one was going to cost so much. And it was going to be a complete strip down, take it apart, put it back together. An engine, which just is a pump and water, runs in the neighborhood, if you buy a custom one, right around $500,000.
Okay.
Now, if, for example, this ladder truck that we've purchased and we should have here in the next 2 months, it's a stock truck, which means we didn't get to design it or anything like that. So there's some give and take, and you always have to worry about, okay, how many miles has been put on it and stuff. And certainly was not my first choice, but yet the urgency to get us a ladder truck, the price, and I joke, I mean, the price was right. It's going to work out well for us. What we're paying at the end of the day for this is $978,000, Rich.
Wow.
And in fire circles, that is more on the low end for a ladder truck with a platform. If I was going to build a custom, we'd probably looking closer to about 1.1 to 1.2 million.
Another couple $100,000 to outfit it the way you would like to if you had if a money was no object situation.
Right. So then you got to ask yourself, okay, so I'm paying just a little less than $1 million. Is it really the right use of that vehicle to be zipping it up and down for EMS calls? So the only other option we had was, let's say I went ahead and I just bought a regular truck.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and that would have been a little bit cheaper because it wouldn't have had the pump and the water on it. Is that really the right thing to do? So my only other option would have been to say, hey, what we're going to do is, because again, a lot of times we only had 2 firefighters at Station 1 based on our minimum staffing.
Yeah.
So what we were going to have to do is say, all right, so if a medical call comes in, you need to take your gear and jump over on the pickup truck, which would have left the ladder truck out of service. So what we call that cross-staffing. Again, mixed feelings on that. You had a camp that said, yeah, a camp that said no. So we sat down, discussed some things with the union, and we felt that our best course of action was to buy what's called a quint. And we already have one of those here. And what a quint is, basically, is you take an engine and a ladder truck and you smash it together. So you have an aerial device on it with a pump and water. Again, trade-offs, not enough compartment space, and you give things up. But we felt that was going to be the best for the citizens, because we could put the quint back out south of town along with a pickup. So that truck is only going to run when absolutely necessary. And as also closing of Station 1 from operations like that, it's going to allow us to put a couple other pickups in service throughout the day to try to take some of that pressure off of the heavy equipment.
So this, I presume, is all going on while you're trying to decide how to maintain the level of service and safety that we have to have.
Yeah, it's very difficult. If we had unlimited funds, I'd love to put a firehouse on every corner. You just can't. So what you look at the statistics, you find out, you try to analyze, the trends. Where's most of the fires? But again, it is very fluid and very dynamic. Things do change. We've started to see a little bit of an uptick in fires on the south side in the apartments and stuff. So having that vehicle out there isn't going to be a bad thing. It is. It's kind of a wild guess on some of it. I hate to say that.
Yeah. You just don't know where those calls are going to come
right.
from. Yeah.
I tell you what, if I could predict where it would be, I'd be making a lot of money around the country telling people how to do this.
So what's at the crux of the fire calls then? People without smoke alarms, people being careless, or are these generally different situations than that?
It's kind of hard to pinpoint that. When you read the literature and stuff, when the economy is doing bad, we tend to see an uptick in events that we have to respond to, and it's simply because people are just trying to survive. When things are going really well, we kind of tend to see fires drop off a little bit. To say it's one thing or another, it's kind of hard to pinpoint. People are people. We all make mistakes, and things just do happen. So, I couldn't stress enough, the smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, if you can afford them, the Edith exit drills in the home stuff. Make sure you have a plan to get out. Teach your children how to get out, because if we know when we arrive and everybody's out, it makes our job easier. It's one less thing that we have to worry about.
Sure.
Because my staff is going to risk everything they can to go after somebody if they know they're in there. So again, if everybody's out, you kind of give a little sigh of relief.
It's just a matter of doing the rest of the work.
Now it's just trying to save as much property as we can.
Yeah. All right. Well, talk about safety. Make sure you have smoke detectors in your home, and there are ways to get them if you can't and you haven't been. In fact, I mentioned to Chief that every time we talk with Mike McClear at Escape, where he says there are programs out there to get free smoke detectors, he gets calls about that. So this is important to know, and if you don't have them, you need to get them, because that's the alert that we need.
Yes.
All right. Well, we'll stay in touch, and best of luck with the new machine that's coming soon.
Yes.
And we'll try and stay ahead of it. We'll stay in touch and talk about this again as time goes on.
Sounds great, Rich. Thank you.
Battle Creek Fire Chief Dave Schmaltz with us on WBCK.